The stagecoach lurched violently to the right, throwing Helena Andrews against the wooden frame hard enough to rattle her teeth. And she knew with absolute certainty that this journey to meet her intended husband was about to become a disaster. Snow had been falling for hours, transforming the Montana Territory landscape into an endless white void, and the driver's increasingly frantic shouts told her everything she needed to know about their chances of reaching Globe before nightfall. The horses screamed as the coach tipped, suspended for one terrible moment before crashing onto its side in a snowdrift that seemed to swallow them whole. Helena's traveling trunk smashed against her shoulder, and she cried out, momentarily stunned by the impact. The world had gone sideways, literally, and through the window above her head she could see nothing but swirling white. Her ears rang with the sound of splintering wood and the panicked neighing of horses fighting their traces. "Miss Andrews, are you hurt?" The driver's voice came muffled through the storm. "I am alive," she called back, testing her limbs. Everything hurt, but nothing seemed broken. "Can you get me out?" "Working on it, madam." Helena tried to calm her racing heart. This was supposed to be simple: travel from St. Louis to Globe, Montana Territory, marry William Sutherland, the prosperous rancher who had courted her through letters for 6 months, and begin her new life in the West. At 22, she had been considered nearly past marriageable age back home, her independent streak and sharp tongue having driven away more conventional suitors. William's letters had promised adventure, partnership, and a life beyond the stifling parlors of Missouri society. She had not expected to die in a snowstorm before even meeting him. The driver, a grizzled man named Pete, finally wrenched the door open. Wind and snow immediately invaded the coach's interior, stealing what little warmth remained. "Can you climb out, miss?" Helena gathered her skirts and accepted his outstretched hand. The effort of climbing from the overturned coach left her gasping, and the cold hit her like a physical blow. Her traveling suit, fashionable and appropriate for St. Louis, was hopelessly inadequate for a Montana blizzard. The horses. She asked through chattering teeth. "Had to cut them loose. They ran off. I do not blame them." Pete looked around, his weathered face grim. "Miss Andrews, we are in serious trouble. I cannot see 10 feet in any direction, and the cold will kill us long before morning. What do we do?" "I saw lights maybe half a mile back, just before we crashed. Could have been a ranch house. It is our only chance." Helena looked at the endless white surrounding them. Half a mile might as well have been half the world in these conditions, but Pete was right. They would freeze if they stayed with the wrecked coach. "Then we walk," she said, surprised by the steadiness of her own voice. Pete retrieved what he could from the wreckage: her smaller carpetbag, a blanket, his rifle. The trunk would have to stay. Helena mourned the loss of her trousseau, but survival mattered more than wedding linens. They set out into the storm. Walking through the blizzard was like wading through white quicksand. Each step required tremendous effort, and the wind cut through Helena's layers of clothing as though they were tissue paper. She had lost feeling in her face within minutes, and her hands, even tucked into her muff, burned with cold. Pete stayed close beside her, one hand on her elbow to keep them together. Time lost all meaning. They might have walked for 10 minutes or an hour. Helena's legs trembled with exhaustion, and she stumbled repeatedly. The world had narrowed to the next step, and the next, and the next. She found herself thinking of William's letters, wondering if he would ever know what had happened to her. Would he think she had changed her mind? Would he mourn her, this woman he had never met? There. Pete's shout barely penetrated the wind's howl. "Lights." Helena lifted her head, hardly daring to hope. Through the swirling snow, she could just make out the warm glow of windows. A building, solid and real. They staggered toward it like sailors toward shore. The structure materialized gradually from the white, a ranch house, built sturdy and low to withstand prairie winds with smoke rising from its chimney. Helena wanted to weep with relief. Pete had to half carry her up the porch steps. He pounded on the door with his fist. "Hello, we need help." "Please." For a terrible moment, nothing happened. Then Helena heard the sound of a bolt being drawn back and the door swung inward, releasing a wave of blessed warmth. A man stood in the doorway, backlit by the fire beyond. He was tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair that fell past his collar and eyes the color of storm clouds. He took in the sight of them, snow-covered and half-frozen, in a single assessing glance. "Get inside," he said, his voice a deep rumble. He reached out and physically lifted Helena over the threshold, his strength effortless. Pete stumbled in after her, and the man shut the door against the storm. Helena found herself standing in a well-appointed main room. A fire roared in a stone fireplace, and the space was furnished simply but comfortably. Bookshelves lined one wall, and she caught sight of titles ranging from cattle breeding manuals to Shakespeare. The air smelled of wood smoke, leather, and something cooking. "Sit by the fire," the man commanded, already moving toward a back room. "I will get blankets." Helena sank onto a chair near the hearth, her legs finally giving out. Pete lowered himself to the floor with a groan, holding his hands toward the flames. Their rescuer returned with an armful of thick wool blankets and began wrapping one around Helena's shoulders. His movements were efficient but surprisingly gentle. "Where did you come from? No one should be out in this storm." "Stagecoach overturned about half a mile back," Pete explained. "We were headed to Globe. This is Miss Helena Andrews. She is supposed to marry William Sutherland." The man's hand stilled for just a moment on the blanket he was tucking around her. Something flickered across his face, too quick for Helena to identify. "This is not the Sutherland Ranch." Helena's heart sank. "We are lost. You are at the Harper place." He moved to wrap a blanket around Pete. "I am Isaiah Harper. The Sutherland Ranch is about 3 miles east of here." "Can we reach it tonight?" Helena asked, already knowing the answer. Isaiah shook his head. "Not in this storm. It would be suicide to try. You will have to stay here until it passes." He straightened, studying her with those penetrating gray eyes. "I will ride to Sutherland's place once the storm breaks and let him know you are safe." "I am sorry to impose," Helena said, trying to stop her teeth from chattering. "You would be dead if you had not found this place." It was a simple statement of fact without drama. "When did you last eat?" Helena tried to remember. "Breakfast, back at the way station that morning." "It felt like years ago." "I have stew on the stove. You need hot food." Isaiah moved to the kitchen area, which occupied one end of the large room. Pete caught Helena's eye and gave her a reassuring nod. The old driver looked as exhausted as she felt, but color was returning to his face with the warmth. Isaiah returned with 2 bowls of thick beef stew and chunks of crusty bread. The smell made Helena's stomach clench with sudden hunger. She took the bowl gratefully, and the first bite was like heaven. The stew was rich and hearty, perfectly seasoned, and she had to force herself not to gulp it down too quickly. "This is excellent," she said. Isaiah had settled into a chair across from them, his long legs stretched toward the fire. "My mother's recipe. She insisted I learn to cook properly before she would let me run this place on my own." "You live here alone?" Helena asked, then immediately worried the question was too forward. "For the past 3 years, since my parents moved to California to be near my sister and her family. The ranch is mine now." He paused. "I have 2 hands who work for me, but I sent them to Globe yesterday before the storm hit. They will be stuck there until it passes." "Lucky for us you stayed," Pete said around a mouthful of bread. I have stock to tend. Could not leave them. Isaiah stood and added another log to the fire. Once you have eaten and warmed up, Miss Andrews, I will give you my room. You need to get out of those wet clothes and rest. Pete, you can have the bunk in the spare room. Helena started to protest that she could not take his bed, but exhaustion was catching up with her now that she was warm and fed. Every muscle in her body ached, and her shoulder throbbed where the trunk had hit her. Isaiah noticed her wince. Are you injured? Just bruised, I think. I have some liniment that might help. He disappeared again and returned with a small tin. My mother swears by it for aches and pains. As Helena finished her stew, she studied their host more carefully. Isaiah Harper was probably close to her own age, perhaps 25 or 26. His face was strongly featured, with a straight nose and a firm jaw shadowed by a day's growth of beard. His hands were scarred and calloused from hard work, but his speech suggested education. Those bookshelves were clearly not just for show. He was, she could not help noticing, remarkably handsome in a rugged, understated way. Nothing like the polished gentleman of St. Louis, but somehow more real, more solid. Helena mentally chastised herself. She was here to marry William Sutherland, not to admire other men. Come on, Isaiah said, offering her his hand. I will show you to the room. His bedroom was as simply furnished as the rest of the house. A large bed with a heavy quilt, a dresser, a washstand. Everything was neat and clean. He set the lamp on the dresser and pulled back the quilt. I will get you something to sleep in. One of my shirts should work. He rummaged in the dresser and produced a soft flannel shirt. It will be large, but it is clean and warm. Thank you for everything. You saved our lives. Isaiah looked at her for a long moment, something unreadable in his gray eyes. Anyone would have done the same. Not everyone would have done it so graciously. A small smile touched his lips, transforming his serious face. Sleep well, Miss Andrews. The storm should blow itself out by morning. After he left, Helena struggled out of her wet traveling suit. Her fingers fumbled with the buttons, still clumsy with cold. The borrowed shirt fell to her knees when she pulled it on, and it smelled faintly of pine and smoke. She climbed into the bed and pulled the heavy quilt over herself. The bed was warm and comfortable, and exhaustion dragged at her. But as she closed her eyes, she found herself thinking not of William Sutherland, the man she had traveled 1,000 miles to marry, but of Isaiah Harper and his storm-gray eyes. Morning brought silence. Helena woke slowly, disoriented by unfamiliar surroundings. Sunlight streamed through the window, painfully bright against snow-covered landscape. The storm had passed. She dressed in her rumpled traveling suit, grimacing at the wrinkles and damp spots that remained. There was nothing to be done about her appearance. Her hair was a disaster without her brushes and pins, but she managed to twist it into a simple braid. When she emerged from the bedroom, she found the main room empty but heard voices outside. Through the window, she saw Isaiah and Pete in the yard, examining something in the barn. The world outside was transformed by snow, everything buried under at least 2 feet of white. The door opened, bringing a gust of cold air and Isaiah stamping snow from his boots. He stopped when he saw her, and again that small smile appeared. Good morning. How did you sleep? Better than I had any right to expect. Thank you again for your hospitality. Coffee is hot. Help yourself. Helena poured herself a cup from the pot on the stove and wrapped her hands around the warm ceramic. Isaiah moved to the window, looking out at the snow-covered landscape. It is deep out there. It will take me a while to saddle a horse and get to the Sutherland place. He turned to look at her. That shoulder's still bothering you, a little. Let me see. Helena hesitated, then set down her coffee cup. Isaiah crossed the room and gently moved aside the collar of her dress. His touch was impersonal, almost clinical, but she felt heat rise in her cheeks anyway. "Nasty bruise," he said. "You were lucky nothing broke. Hold still." He retrieved the tin of liniment and carefully applied some to her shoulder through the thin fabric of her chemise. His hands were warm and sure, and despite herself, Helena felt something flutter in her chest. This was ridiculous. She was engaged to another man. She had no business noticing how gentle Isaiah's touch was or how close he was standing. "Better?" he asked, stepping back. "Yes, thank you." Pete came in then, breaking the moment. "Morning, Miss Andrews. That is quite a bit of snow out there." "I was just telling Miss Andrews that I will ride to Sutherland's place this morning," Isaiah said. "He will probably want to come fetch her himself." The thought of finally meeting William should have filled Helena with excitement. Instead, she felt oddly reluctant. She told herself it was just anxiety about making a good impression after such a disastrous arrival. "I will make breakfast before I go," Isaiah said. "You should not travel on an empty stomach." He cooked with the same competent efficiency he brought to everything else. Soon the kitchen was filled with the smell of bacon and eggs. They ate together at the rough wooden table, and Helena found herself watching Isaiah when she thought he was not looking. He moved with a kind of unconscious grace, conserving motion, everything deliberate and purposeful. "How long have you been ranching?" she asked. "All my life. I was born in this house. My father built it the year before I was born." Pride colored his voice. "We have good grazing land here, access to water. It is a fine piece of property. You must miss your family." "I do. But this is my home. I could never leave it." He looked at her directly. "That must seem strange to you, traveling so far to marry a man you have never met." Helena stiffened slightly. "Is it so strange to want a new life, to seek opportunity beyond what society prescribes?" "No," Isaiah said quietly. "I suppose it is not. Forgive me, I did not mean to criticize." William's letters were very persuasive. He described a life of partnership, of building something together. That appealed to me more than another season of St. Louis society balls and empty conversation. "Sutherland is a successful rancher. His spread is twice the size of mine." There was something odd in Isaiah's tone, but Helena could not identify it. After breakfast, Isaiah saddled his horse, a sturdy bay gelding that stood patiently while he worked. Helena and Pete stood on the porch, watching. "I will be back with Sutherland before noon, I expect," Isaiah called. Then he swung into the saddle and rode off, the horse's legs disappearing into the deep snow with each step. Helena watched until he disappeared from view, then went back inside. The house felt strangely empty without him. "He is a good man," Pete said, settling by the fire with his pipe. "Not many would have taken us in like that." "No," Helena agreed softly. She spent the next hour trying to make herself more presentable. She found a brush in Isaiah's room and worked the tangles from her hair, then pinned it up as best she could. Her traveling suit was hopelessly wrinkled, but she brushed off the worst of it. When she looked in the small mirror over the washstand, she saw a pale young woman with dark circles under her eyes, her auburn hair escaping its pins. Not exactly the fresh bride William Sutherland would be expecting. The sound of horses brought her to the window. Two riders approached the house, and her heart began to pound. Isaiah on his bay, and beside him a man on a magnificent black stallion, William Sutherland. She hurried to the door, smoothing her skirts nervously. This was it. The moment she had traveled 1,000 miles for. The riders dismounted, and Helena got her first look at her intended husband. William was perhaps 40, tall and well-built, with blonde hair graying at the temples and a neatly trimmed beard. He was handsome in a polished way, dressed in expensive riding clothes that spoke of prosperity. He smiled when he saw her, showing white teeth. Miss Andrews. What an introduction to Montana territory this has been for you." His voice was smooth and cultured, with just a hint of the West in its cadence. He bounded up the porch steps and took her hand, raising it almost to his lips. "I am delighted that you are safe. When Isaiah brought word of the accident, I came immediately. Mr. Sutherland, I apologize for the inconvenience. The storm was an act of God, not your fault." He turned to Isaiah, who had followed more slowly. "Thank you for taking care of my bride, Harper. I am in your debt." Something in the way William said "my bride" made Helena's skin prickle, as though she were already his possession. "Anyone would have done the same," Isaiah said, echoing his words from the night before. His expression was carefully neutral. "Nevertheless, I am grateful." William turned back to Helena. "Are you ready to come to your new home? I have a carriage waiting at the main road. Isaiah kindly agreed to help transport your belongings, though I understand your trunk was lost." "Yes, I am afraid so. No matter, we will have the dressmaker in Globe outfit you with everything you need." William's smile was generous. "Only the best for my bride." Helena glanced at Isaiah, who was carefully not looking at her. "I should gather my things." Inside, Pete was already waiting with her carpet bag. "Good luck, Miss Andrews. I am glad we made it through." "So am I. Thank you, Pete, for getting me this far." She turned to take one last look at the room that had sheltered her. The fire still burned in the hearth, and Isaiah's flannel shirt lay folded on the bed where she had left it. She had been here less than a day, but somehow it felt like leaving something important behind. Outside, William helped her onto his horse with practiced ease, then swung up behind her. She was uncomfortably aware of his body pressed against her back, his arms around her as he took the reins. "Wave goodbye to your rescuer," William said cheerfully. Helena looked back at Isaiah, who stood on the porch watching them ride away. Their eyes met for a moment, and something passed between them, unspoken and unnameable. Then William urged the horse forward, and Isaiah was lost to view. The ride to the main road took about 20 minutes. A covered carriage waited there, driven by one of William's ranch hands. William helped Helena inside, and she sank gratefully onto the cushioned seat. Through the window, she caught one last glimpse of Isaiah on his bay horse, riding back toward his ranch alone. "I hope Harper treated you well," William said, settling beside her. The carriage lurched into motion. "He was very kind, a perfect gentleman." "Good, good. Isaiah is a decent sort, though he keeps to himself too much, not much for society." William patted her hand. "You will find my home far more comfortable. I have done well for myself, Miss Andrews. You will want for nothing." "Please call me Helena." "Helena, a beautiful name." He studied her face. "Your letters did not do you justice. You are lovelier than I imagined." Helena felt herself flush. "You are too kind. Not at all. I am a lucky man." His hand remained on hers, warm and slightly damp. "Tell me, are you still of a mind to marry? I realize the journey has been difficult and you have not yet seen my ranch. If you need more time to decide, no," Helena said quickly. She had come too far to turn back now. What would she do if she refused? She had no return fare, no family to take her in, and William seemed pleasant enough if a bit forward. "I agreed to marry you, Mr. Sutherland. I keep my word." "William, please. After all, we will be man and wife soon," he smiled. "I am glad to hear it. I have waited a long time for a partner like you, Helena. Someone with spirit and intelligence. The frontier needs strong women." They talked as the carriage rolled through the snow-covered landscape. William described his ranch, his cattle operation, his standing in the community. He was clearly proud of what he had built, and Helena tried to match his enthusiasm. But her mind kept drifting back to a quiet ranch house, and a man with storm-gray eyes who read Shakespeare and cooked his mother's beef stew recipe. The Sutherland Ranch was indeed impressive. The main house was twice the size of Isaiah's, built of fine milled lumber with a broad front porch and glass windows. Outbuildings dotted the property: barns, bunkhouses, storage sheds. Several ranch hands stopped their work to stare as the carriage pulled up. "Welcome home," William said grandly, helping her down. A Mexican woman emerged from the house, wiping her hands on her apron. She was middle-aged, with kind eyes and silver threads in her dark hair. "This is Maria," William said. "She keeps house for me." "Maria, this is Miss Andrews, my intended bride. Please show her to the guest room and help her get settled. She has had a trying journey." "Of course, Señor Sutherland." Maria smiled warmly at Helena. "Come, señorita, I will take care of you." The guest room was beautifully appointed, with a four-poster bed, thick carpets, and delicate curtains. Someone had already laid out a dress on the bed, a lovely blue silk that looked about Helena's size. "Señor Sutherland had this brought from Globe," Maria explained. "He has been preparing for your arrival for weeks. He is very excited." "It is beautiful, thank you." Maria helped her out of the rumpled traveling suit and into the silk dress. It fit remarkably well, just a bit loose in the waist. Maria produced pins and fixed Helena's hair into an elegant style that made her look far more sophisticated than she felt. "There," Maria said with satisfaction. "Now you look like the mistress of this house." Helena studied her reflection in the full-length mirror. She looked like a stranger, this elegant young woman in silk. Was this who she was meant to be? William's bride, the mistress of this grand house. A knock at the door interrupted her thoughts. "Helena, are you decent? I thought you might like a tour of the property before dinner," William called. "Just a moment." Helena took a deep breath and opened the door. William's eyes lit up when he saw her. "Magnificent. I knew that dress would suit you. Come, let me show you what will be your new home." He led her through the house, pointing out features with obvious pride. The parlor with its fine furniture shipped from Chicago. The dining room with its mahogany table that could seat 12. His office, lined with account books and maps. The house was undeniably impressive, but it felt oddly impersonal, like a hotel rather than a home. Outside, William showed her the barns, the corrals, the bunkhouse where his dozen ranch hands lived. He introduced her to his foreman, a gruff man named Richards who touched his hat and muttered a greeting. The men all watched her with open curiosity, and Helena felt like an exhibit at a fair. "I run 2,000 head of cattle," William was saying. "We ship east twice a year. It is a profitable operation, and it will only grow. In a few years, I will be one of the largest ranchers in the territory." "It is very impressive," Helena said dutifully. "I am glad you think so." They had walked to a small rise overlooking the property. William took her hand. "I know this is all happening quickly, Helena. We have not had a proper courtship, but I hope you can be happy here. I will do my best to make you so." There was sincerity in his voice, and Helena felt guilty for her earlier uncharitable thoughts. William was trying to be kind. He had opened his home to her, provided her with clothes, treated her with courtesy. Many women would envy her position. "I am sure I will be," she said. "Good." He squeezed her hand. "I have scheduled our wedding for 3 days from now. The circuit preacher will be passing through Globe, and I have arranged for him to perform the ceremony. That will give you time to rest and recover from your journey. Is that acceptable? 3 days." Helena felt a flutter of panic, but she pushed it down. This was what she had come here for. "Yes, that is acceptable." "Excellent." William looked pleased. "We will have a small ceremony here at the ranch, just family and close friends. Afterward, a dinner celebration. Nothing too elaborate, but befitting the occasion." They walked back to the house as the sun began to set. painting the snow-covered landscape in shades of pink and gold. It was beautiful, Helena had to admit. This could be a good life. William was successful, respected, and he seemed genuinely fond of her. What more could she ask for? That night, lying in the comfortable guest bed, Helena tried to picture her future. She would marry William in 3 days. She would become mistress of this grand house. She would host dinners and manage the household and perhaps eventually have children. It was everything she had agreed to when she answered his letters. So why did she feel so hollow? She thought of Isaiah Harper, alone in his smaller house with his bookshelves and his mother's recipes. She wondered what he was doing right now. Probably reading by the fire or maybe tending to late-night ranch chores. Did he think of her at all? Helena rolled over, burying her face in the pillow. This was foolish. She had spent one night under Isaiah's roof. She barely knew the man. Yet she could not stop thinking about the way he had looked at her, the gentleness of his hands when he had treated her bruised shoulder, the quiet competence with which he had moved through his home. She had to stop this. She was engaged to William Sutherland, and in 3 days she would marry him. Isaiah Harper was nothing more than a kind stranger who had helped her in a crisis. That was all. But sleep was a long time coming, and when she finally drifted off, she dreamed of storm-gray eyes and flannel shirts that smelled of pine. The next 2 days passed in a blur of activity. The dressmaker from Globe arrived with samples and measurements, and Helena was fitted for a wedding dress and several-day dresses. William insisted she have an entire wardrobe to replace what was lost in the stagecoach accident. "Only the best," he kept saying, waving away her protests about the expense. "You will be my wife. You must dress the part." Maria proved to be a godsend. She helped Helena navigate the bewildering array of choices and offered gentle advice about life on a frontier ranch. She had worked for William for 5 years and spoke of him with respect, though Helena noticed she was careful in her words. "Senor Sutherland is a good employer," Maria said as they folded the new dresses into the wardrobe. "He pays well and on time. He does not mistreat the workers." It was not exactly a ringing endorsement, but Helena supposed it was sufficient. She tried to spend time with William to get to know the man she would marry, but he was often busy with ranch business. When they were together, he talked mostly about himself, his plans, his accomplishments. He seemed to view Helena more as an acquisition than a partner, though he was always courteous. On the evening before the wedding, William hosted a small dinner party. Several neighbors and business associates attended, along with Pete, the stagecoach driver, who had stayed in town and would be heading back east after the wedding. Helena wore her new green silk dress and played the role of hostess, making conversation and ensuring everyone was comfortable. She was talking to the banker's wife about the upcoming spring social season when she noticed a late arrival being shown into the parlor. Her heart skipped a beat. Isaiah Harper stood in the doorway, dressed in what were clearly his best clothes, a dark suit that made his shoulders look even broader. He was freshly shaved, his dark hair neatly combed, and he looked distinctly uncomfortable in the formal setting. William hurried over to greet him. "Harper, I am glad you could make it. It would not be right to celebrate without the man who saved my bride's life." Isaiah's eyes found Helena across the room. For a moment, the chatter and laughter of the party faded away, and there was only that connection between them. Then William was leading him over, and Helena had to remember to breathe. "Helena, you remember Isaiah Harper, of course, Mr. Harper. How good of you to come." Her voice sounded strained even to her own ears. "Miss Andrews." Isaiah's deep voice was carefully neutral. "I am glad to see you looking so well. Thanks to you." An awkward silence stretched between them. William looked from one to the other, his smile faltering slightly. "Yes, well," "Harper, let me get you a drink. We have an excellent whiskey I think you will appreciate." As William led Isaiah away, Helena found she could not take her eyes off them. Isaiah moved through the crowded room like a wolf among dogs, clearly out of place but too proud to show discomfort. Several people tried to engage him in conversation, but his responses were brief. Throughout dinner, Helena was acutely aware of his presence. He was seated several places down the long table between the banker and one of William's business partners. She caught him looking at her twice, and each time the intensity of his gaze made her pulse race. This was madness. Tomorrow she would marry William. She needed to forget about Isaiah Harper and his storm-gray eyes. After dinner, the men retired to William's office for cigars and business talk, while the ladies gathered in the parlor. Helena made polite conversation and accepted congratulations on her upcoming marriage, all while wondering what was being said in that closed room. When the party finally began to break up, Helena stood on the porch with William, bidding guests good night. Isaiah was among the last to leave. He shook William's hand and thanked him for the dinner, then turned to Helena. "I wish you every happiness, Miss Andrews." There was something in his voice, a note she could not quite identify. Sadness, regret. "Thank you, Mr. Harper, for everything." He held her gaze for a long moment, and Helena felt as though he was trying to tell her something without words. Then he settled his hat on his head and walked to his horse. She watched him ride away into the darkness, and felt as though something vital was being torn from her chest. "Good man, Harper," William said, his arm coming around her waist. "A bit rough around the edges, but solid. You were lucky he found you." "Yes," Helena whispered. "Lucky." That night she could not sleep at all. She paced her room, her mind in turmoil. Tomorrow she would marry William Sutherland. She would become his wife, would share his bed, would bear his children. It was what she had agreed to. It was why she had come here. But every time she closed her eyes, she saw Isaiah's face. Finally, as dawn began to lighten the sky, Helena admitted the truth to herself. Somewhere between the moment Isaiah had opened his door to a half-frozen stranger and the moment he had ridden away into the darkness, she had fallen in love with him. It was impossible. It was impractical. It changed nothing. She was going to marry William today, and that was that. Helena dressed in her wedding gown with Maria's help. It was beautiful, white satin with delicate lace at the collar and cuffs. Maria fixed her hair in an elaborate style and placed a simple veil over it. When Helena looked in the mirror, she saw a proper bride. She looked nothing like herself. "You are very beautiful, Señorita," Maria said softly. Then, more quietly, "Are you certain this is what you want?" Helena met the older woman's eyes in the mirror. "Why do you ask?" Maria hesitated, then shook her head. "Forgive me, it is not my place. Please, tell me." "I have worked for Señor Sutherland for 5 years. He is a good employer, as I said, but he is also a proud man, a man who likes to own things, to possess them." Maria's dark eyes were troubled. "I have watched you these past days. You are a woman who has her own thoughts, her own will." "I am not sure Señor Sutherland will appreciate that. He said he wanted a partner," Helena said. "Men say many things. Actions speak truth." Maria placed a gentle hand on Helena's shoulder. "I say too much. But I have daughters of my own, and if one of them stood where you stand now, I would want someone to speak. What do you think I should do? Only you can answer that, Señorita. But I will say this. In my experience, a woman should marry a man who sees her, truly sees her. Not what he wants her to be, but what she is." A knock at the door interrupted them. "Helena, are you ready? The preacher is here," William called. Maria squeezed her shoulder once, then went to open the door. William stood there in a fine black suit, looking every inch the prosperous rancher. His face lit up when he saw Helena. "You look magnificent, absolutely magnificent. Come, everyone is waiting." He offered his arm, and Helena took it because she did not know what else to do. Her mind was spinning. Maria's words echoed in her head. A man who sees her, truly sees her. The ceremony was to take place in the parlor. Chairs had been arranged, and perhaps 20 people filled them. Pete was there, smiling at her encouragingly. The preacher stood before the fireplace, his Bible open in his hands. But Helena's eyes went immediately to a figure standing at the back of the room. Isaiah Harper, again in his dark suit, his face carefully expressionless. Why was he here? Had William invited him? Their eyes met, and in that instant, Helena knew. She could see it in his face, the same truth she had admitted to herself this morning. He loved her. Maybe he did not realize it himself yet, or maybe he was trying to honor her engagement, but it was there in his eyes, clear as day. And suddenly, everything else fell away. The crowd, the ceremony, William's hand on her arm. There was only one question that mattered. What did she want? Not what was practical, not what she had agreed to, not what society expected. What did Helena Andrews want? The answer came with absolute clarity. "Stop," she said. William looked at her in confusion. "What? I cannot do this." Helena pulled her arm free from his. Her heart was pounding so hard she thought it might burst from her chest. "I am sorry, William. I am so sorry, but I cannot marry you." Gasps rippled through the assembled guests. William's face went from confused to angry in an instant. "What are you talking about? The ceremony is about to start." "I know, and I am sorry." Helena was shaking, but her voice was steady. "You are a good man, William. You have been generous and kind, but I do not love you. And I do not think you love me, not really. You love the idea of me, the idea of having a wife, but you do not know me." "This is pre-wedding nerves," William said, his voice tight. "Perfectly natural. But we had an agreement, Helena. An agreement I should never have made." She looked around at the shocked faces, then found Isaiah's gaze again. He had not moved, but something had changed in his expression. "Hope, maybe. I came here looking for a new life, for something more than what I had. I thought that meant marriage to a successful rancher. But what I really want is something else entirely." "And what is that?" William demanded. "A partner who sees me as an equal, a man who shares my interests, who challenges my mind, who makes me laugh." Her voice dropped. "A man I love and who loves me in return." "I offered you all of that," William said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. "No, you offered me security and status. That is not the same thing." Helena turned to face him fully. "Tell me truly, William, can you name one thing about me that you love? Not my appearance, not my accomplishments, but something about who I am." He opened his mouth, then closed it. The silence stretched. "I thought not," Helena said gently. "You do not love me any more than I love you. We would have made each other miserable." William's face had gone red. "You agreed to marry me. You came all this way, and now you humiliate me in front of my friends and neighbors. I am sorry for the humiliation, truly. But better this than a lifetime of unhappiness for both of us. Get out." His voice was cold now. "Get out of my house. You can walk back to Globe in your wedding dress for all I care." "William, that is too harsh," one of the guests protested. "She is a liar and a cheat. I will not have her under my roof another moment." Helena began unpinning the veil with trembling fingers. This was it then. She had just thrown away her security, her future, everything. She had nowhere to go, no money, nothing but the clothes on her back. She will not be walking anywhere. Everyone turned. Isaiah had stepped forward, his face set with determination. He walked through the stunned crowd until he stood beside Helena. "She will come with me," he said quietly. William laughed harshly. "Of course. I should have known. My good neighbor, Harper, stealing my bride." "She was never yours to steal," Isaiah said. "A woman is not property." "Stay out of this, Harper. This does not concern you. It concerns me if you are threatening to throw a woman out in the cold with nowhere to go." Isaiah's voice was calm, but there was steel underneath. "Miss Andrews will come to my ranch. She will be safe there." "How convenient for you." Isaiah's jaw tightened, but he kept his temper. "Think what you like, Sutherland, but I will not let you mistreat her." Helena found her voice. "Isaiah, you do not have to do this. You have already done so much." He looked down at her, and the expression in his gray eyes made her breath catch. "Yes, I do." "How touching," William sneered. "My cast-off bride and the lonely hermit, you deserve each other." Several of the guests looked uncomfortable now. Pete had stood up, his hand on the gun at his belt. "That is enough, Sutherland. The lady made her choice. Be man enough to accept it." For a moment, Helena thought William might actually become violent. His hands clenched into fists and a vein throbbed in his temple. Then he seemed to get hold of himself. "Fine. Take her. But do not think you are welcome on my property ever again, Harper. And as for you, Miss Andrews, I hope you enjoy ranch life in a house half the size of mine, with a man who has half my prospects." "I already enjoyed it more than you know," Helena said quietly. She turned and walked toward the door, Isaiah falling into step beside her. The guests parted to let them through. No one spoke. As they reached the exit, Maria appeared with Helena's carpetbag and a wrapped bundle. "Your things, señorita, and some food for the journey." The older woman smiled. "Vaya con Dios." "Thank you, Maria, for everything." Outside, Isaiah's horse was tied to the rail. He helped Helena up, then swung into the saddle behind her. His arms came around her to take the reins, and Helena let herself lean back against his solid chest. "Are you all right?" he asked quietly. "Ask me when I stop shaking." She felt his chest rumble with a quiet laugh. "Fair enough." They rode away from the Sutherland ranch at a trot. Behind them, Helena could hear William's voice raised in anger, but the words were lost to the wind. She did not look back. The landscape passed in a blur. Helena's mind was racing, trying to process everything that had just happened. She had just thrown away her engagement, her security, her plans for the future. She had humiliated a man in front of his peers. She had caused a scandal that would be talked about for months. And she felt freer than she had in years. "Helena," Isaiah's voice was gentle. "Why did you do it? Call off the wedding?" She twisted in the saddle to look up at him. "Because I realized I was about to make the biggest mistake of my life. Marrying someone I did not love for all the wrong reasons. That was brave or foolish. Sometimes they are the same thing." He paused. "You know this will cause talk, you staying at my ranch, I know. I am sorry to put you in this position. I am not." His arms tightened around her just slightly. "I am glad you did it." Helena's heart was pounding again. "Isaiah, when you came to the ceremony today, why did you come?" He was quiet for a long moment. The only sounds were the horses' hooves crunching through snow and the wind in the trees. Finally, he spoke. "Because I had to see you. One last time before you married him. I told myself I was just being a good neighbor, paying my respects. But the truth is, I could not bear the thought of never seeing you again." "Why? You know why." Helena turned fully in the saddle, forcing him to pull the horse to a stop. They sat there in the middle of the snowy landscape, looking at each other. "Say it," she whispered. "Please." Isaiah's hand came up to cup her cheek, his rough palm warm against her skin. "Because I fell in love with you. Sometime between opening my door to a half-frozen stranger and watching her ride away with another man. I know it is impossible. I know it makes no sense, but there it is." "It is not impossible," Helena said, "because I fell in love with you too." For a moment, they just stared at each other. Then Isaiah was kissing her, and Helena was kissing him back, and nothing else mattered. His lips were warm and firm, and the kiss tasted of hope and new beginnings and promises yet to be made. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Isaiah rested his forehead against hers. "What do we do now?" he asked. "I suppose we figure it out together." Together, I like the sound of that. They rode the rest of the way to Isaiah's ranch in silence, but it was a comfortable silence now, full of possibility. When the house came into view, Helena felt something settle in her chest. This place felt right in a way the Sutherland ranch never had. Isaiah helped her down, then led his horse to the barn. Helena stood in the yard, looking at the house. It was smaller than William's, yes, simpler. But it was a home, lived in and loved. She could be happy here. Isaiah emerged from the barn and came to stand beside her. "I should probably tell you, this is not quite what I imagined when I invited you here." "What did you imagine, honestly?" "I thought I would give you a place to stay while you figured out your next move. Maybe help you get a ticket back to St. Louis if that was what you wanted." He turned to look at her. "I did not dare hope that you might feel the same way I do." "Well, I do, so now what?" "Now I suppose I court you properly. Do this right." Helena laughed. "I think we are a bit past proper courting, considering I just ran out on my wedding and I am currently wearing the dress I was supposed to marry another man in." "Fair point." Isaiah smiled, that small smile that transformed his face. "Maybe we should get you out of that dress." At Helena's startled look, he flushed. "I meant into something more comfortable. One of my shirts again, maybe. That came out wrong." "It did." Helena was laughing now, really laughing, and it felt wonderful. "But I appreciate the offer. The dress is rather constricting." Inside, Isaiah built up the fire while Helena changed in his bedroom. She emerged wearing one of his flannel shirts and her petticoat, her hair loose around her shoulders. Isaiah had removed his suit jacket and rolled up his shirt sleeves, and he was putting coffee on to boil. "Better?" he asked. "Much." Helena sat in the chair by the fire, tucking her feet under her. "Isaiah, what happens now?" Realistically, he brought her a cup of coffee and sat across from her. "Realistically, there will be talk. William is going to tell his version of events, and it will not be flattering to either of us. Some people will judge you harshly for breaking your engagement. Some will judge me for taking you in. I do not care what they think. You say that now. But living with gossip and judgment is harder than you might think. So what do you suggest?" Isaiah was quiet for a moment, staring into his coffee cup. When he looked up, there was determination in his gray eyes. "Marry me." Helena's heart skipped. "What? Marry me?" "Not because it is practical, though it would solve some problems. Not to protect your reputation, though it would do that too." He set down his cup and took her hands. "Marry me because I love you, because I want to spend every day of the rest of my life with you, because I see you, Helena. Your intelligence, your courage, your spirit, and I do not want to change any of it." Tears were streaming down Helena's face. "Isaiah, we have known each other for 4 days. I know it is fast, it is probably crazy." His hands tightened on hers. "But sometimes you just know. And I know that you are the woman I have been waiting for all my life. What if we are wrong? What if this is just, I do not know, the drama of the situation making us feel things that are not real? Then we will figure it out together, but I do not think I am wrong. Do you?" Helena thought about the past 4 days. The way Isaiah had cared for her when she was a stranger. The gentleness of his touch. The books on his shelves and the way he moved through his home with quiet competence. The way she felt when he looked at her, truly seen for the first time in her life. "No," she whispered. "I do not think you are wrong either. Then marry me. Stay here, build a life with me. We will run this ranch together as true partners. I am not wealthy like Sutherland, but we will have enough. And you will be loved, Helena. Every single day you will be loved." "Yes." The word came out choked with tears, but there was no hesitation in it. "Yes, I will marry you." Isaiah pulled her into his arms, and they stayed like that for a long time, just holding each other by the firelight. Outside, The Montana winter landscape stretched endlessly white, but inside, everything was warm. Eventually, practical matters had to be discussed. They would need to go to Globe to arrange the marriage, to deal with the scandal, to face whatever judgment came their way. But that could wait until tomorrow. Tonight, they sat by the fire and talked. Really talked, the way Helena had always dreamed of talking with a partner. Isaiah told her about his childhood on the ranch, about his parents and sister, about his dreams for the future. Helena told him about St. Louis, about feeling trapped in a life that did not fit, about the loneliness of being constantly misunderstood. "I read your letters to Sutherland," Isaiah admitted. "What? How?" He showed them around. Was proud of landing such an educated bride. "I remember thinking that he had no idea what he had, that he saw you as an ornament, not a person. And you saw me differently. I saw a woman who was brave enough to cross the country for a chance at something more, a woman who asked questions and had opinions of her own. I thought you deserved better than William Sutherland." "Did you think you might be that better?" Isaiah smiled ruefully. "I did not dare hope. You were engaged to my neighbor, a man far more successful than I am. What could I offer you?" "Everything that matters," Helena said softly. As the night grew late, Isaiah insisted Helena take his bed again while he made do with a bedroll by the fire. She protested, but he was firm. "We will be married soon enough," he said. "But until then, we do this properly." Helena kissed him good night, a sweet, lingering kiss that promised more to come. In the bedroom, she crawled under the familiar quilt and buried her face in the pillow that smelled of pine and smoke. 24 hours ago, she had been preparing to marry William Sutherland. Now she was engaged to Isaiah Harper, and it felt more right than anything in her life had ever felt. She fell asleep with a smile on her face. The next morning dawned clear and cold. Isaiah had breakfast ready when Helena emerged: eggs, bacon, and fresh bread. "Where did you get fresh bread?" she asked. "Baked it last night while you slept. Figured we would need our strength for today." "You bake too?" "I told you, my mother made sure I could take care of myself." He poured her coffee. "I sent one of the ranch hands to Globe early this morning. The circuit preacher is still there. If you are still willing, we could marry today." Helena's heart raced, but not with fear, with excitement. "Today? I know it is fast. We can wait if you want, have a proper courtship." "No." Helena reached across the table and took his hand. "I do not want to wait. Let people think what they want. I know what I want." Isaiah's smile lit up his whole face. "Then let us get married." They prepared for the trip to Globe. Helena wore one of her new day dresses, a simple green cotton. Isaiah dressed in his Sunday best. As they were about to leave, a rider approached the house. It was Pete, looking serious. "Morning, Miss Andrews." "Harper. Thought you should know. Sutherland is in town telling everyone who will listen that you two have been carrying on behind his back. Says Harper stole his bride." Helena's stomach dropped. "That is not true. I know that. And I have been telling everyone the real story, how you two met when the stage crashed and nothing improper happened." Pete dismounted and tied his horse. "But you should be prepared. There are folks who will believe Sutherland's version." "Let them," Isaiah said firmly. "We know the truth." "There is something else." Pete looked uncomfortable. "Sutherland is making noise about suing Harper for breach of contract or some such. Says Helena was promised to him." "A marriage promise is not a contract he can enforce," Helena said. "I had not yet spoken vows." "Probably not, but he could make trouble, tie things up legally." Isaiah's jaw tightened. "Then let him try. I am not afraid of William Sutherland." They rode to Globe together, Pete accompanying them. The town was small but bustling, built around a main street lined with businesses. Helena could feel people staring as they passed. Word had clearly spread. The preacher, A kindly man named Reverend Thomas agreed to perform the ceremony despite the circumstances. "I have been hearing some wild stories," he said, "but having spoken with young Pete here about what actually happened, I see no reason to refuse. You are both of age and entering into this marriage freely." "Yes," Helena and Isaiah said in unison. "Then I will perform the ceremony. Though I will tell you, it would be wise to have witnesses, given the gossip. Make it all legal and proper, so no one can claim otherwise later." Pete volunteered immediately. They found 2 other witnesses in the general store owner and his wife, an elderly couple who seemed more amused than scandalized by the situation. The ceremony took place in the small church at the edge of town. It was nothing like the elaborate wedding William had planned. No fancy dress, no crowd of guests, no dinner party. Just Helena and Isaiah standing before God and witnesses, pledging their lives to each other. When the Reverend said, "You may kiss your bride," Isaiah cupped Helena's face in his hands and kissed her with a tenderness that brought tears to her eyes. "I love you," he whispered against her lips. "I love you too." They signed the marriage certificate, making it official. Helena Harper. She tested the name silently and found she liked it very much. As they left the church, they found a small crowd had gathered. William Sutherland stood at the front, his face dark with anger. "This is a farce," he announced loudly. "That woman was promised to me, and she changed her mind, as is her right," Reverend Thomas said calmly. He held up the marriage certificate. "But she is married now, Mr. Sutherland, legally and properly married. I suggest you accept that and move on. She is a liar and a cheat. That is enough." Isaiah stepped forward, placing himself between Helena and William. "Miss Andrews, excuse me, Mrs. Harper is my wife. I will not have you speaking about her that way." "Your wife," William spat. "For now, but how long do you think it will last? She has already proven she cannot be trusted to keep her word." "I broke an engagement, not a vow," Helena said, stepping up beside Isaiah. "There is a difference, and I broke it before any promises were made before God, which was the right thing to do. Better that than marrying you knowing I did not love you." Some of the onlookers nodded at that. Even on the frontier, there was respect for honesty. William seemed to realize he was losing the crowd's sympathy. "You will regret this," he said, pointing at Isaiah. "Both of you." "I doubt that," Isaiah said calmly. "Now, if you will excuse us, I would like to take my wife home." He offered Helena his arm, and they walked through the crowd to where their horses waited. No one stopped them. As they mounted up, Helena heard the murmur of voices behind them, some disapproving but many sympathetic. "That took courage, what you did," the store owner's wife called out. "Good luck to you both." It was not much, but it was something. They rode back to the ranch in the afternoon sunshine. The storm that had brought Helena to Montana felt like a lifetime ago, though it had only been 5 days. 5 days, and her entire life had changed. "No regrets?" Isaiah asked as the ranch house came into view. "None," Helena said firmly. "You? Only that I did not meet you sooner." That night they sat by the fire as husband and wife, and it felt like the most natural thing in the world. When bedtime came, Isaiah took Helena's hand and led her to the bedroom they would now share. "I have never," Helena began, then stopped, blushing. "I know, neither have I." Isaiah smiled gently. "We will figure it out together." And they did, with tenderness and laughter and love. It was not perfect or graceful, but it was theirs, and that made it beautiful. Afterward, lying in Isaiah's arms with her head on his chest, listening to the steady beat of his heart, Helena felt a peace she had never known before. This was where she belonged. Not in some grand house with a man who saw her as a possession, but here, in this simple ranch house with a man who loved her for exactly who she was. "What are you thinking?" Isaiah asked, his fingers trailing through her hair. That I am happy, truly, deeply happy. Good. He pressed a kiss to the top of her head. That is all I want, to make you happy. You already have. The days that followed were not without challenges. As Isaiah had predicted, there was gossip. Some people in Globe sided with William, believing Helena had behaved shamefully. A few even refused to do business with Isaiah, claiming he was a home wrecker. But more people, especially once they got to know Helena, came around. She proved herself to be not some flighty society girl, but a hard-working partner who was not afraid to get her hands dirty. She learned to help with the ranch work, to cook hearty meals for Isaiah and his 2 ranch hands, to manage the household accounts. She also made friends. Maria, who had been quietly fired by William for helping Helena escape with her belongings, came to work for the Harpers. Several of the townswomen, initially standoffish, warmed up after Helena helped organize a fundraiser for the church. Isaiah's parents wrote from California, delighted to hear their son had married. His mother's letter was particularly warm, saying she could tell from Isaiah's description that Helena was exactly the kind of woman she had hoped he would find. William Sutherland continued to make trouble for a while, spreading rumors and trying to undermine Isaiah's business relationships. But eventually, even he seemed to accept that Helena was not coming back. 6 months after Helena's failed wedding, word came that William had begun courting a widow from a neighboring town. Helena felt nothing but relief. The first year of their marriage brought its share of difficulties. A hard winter tested their resources. A prairie fire threatened the ranch, though they managed to save most of the buildings. Helena suffered a miscarriage that left both her and Isaiah grieving, but through it all, they faced everything together, and their love only grew stronger. I think the worst is behind us, Isaiah said one evening as they sat on the porch, watching the sunset paint the sky in shades of gold and pink. Do not jinx it, Helena teased, leaning against his shoulder. I am serious. We have been tested and we have survived. We can handle anything now. Helena thought about the journey that had brought her here. The stagecoach crash, the terrifying walk through the blizzard, Isaiah opening his door. The moment she had realized she was about to marry the wrong man. The courage it had taken to stop the wedding, and the leap of faith when she had said yes to Isaiah. You ever wonder what would have happened if the stagecoach had not crashed? She asked. All the time, Isaiah admitted. I would have gone my whole life never knowing you existed. That is a terrible thought. Or I would have married William and been miserable. I prefer not to think about that. He pulled her closer. I would rather focus on what did happen. A storm brought you to my door and I was lucky enough to fall in love with you. We were both lucky. No. Isaiah turned to face her, his gray eyes serious. Luck implies chance. What we have, what we built, that was choice. You chose to call off that wedding. I chose to speak up. We chose each other, Helena. That is not luck. That is love. Helena kissed him, pouring all her feelings into it. He was right. They had chosen each other, and they kept choosing each other every day. The following spring brought new life to the ranch. The cattle herd grew. Isaiah hired another ranch hand. Helena planted a garden and spent long hours with Maria learning to preserve food for winter. She also began teaching reading and writing to some of the children in town, using the education she had received in St. Louis to give back to her new community. And in early summer, Helena discovered she was pregnant again. This time, the pregnancy held, and on a cold January morning she gave birth to a healthy baby boy. They named him Ethan Isaiah Harper, and when Isaiah held his son for the first time, there were tears in his eyes. He is perfect, he whispered. He is loud, Helena said with a tired laugh as the baby began to wail. That too. Isaiah carefully passed the baby to Helena, who put him to her breast. He watched them, his wife and child, with an expression of such love that it took Helena's breath away. "Thank you," he said. "For what?" "For taking a chance on me, for building this life with me, for giving me a family." "Thank you for answering the door that night," Helena replied softly. "Thank you for seeing me. The years that followed were good ones. They had their struggles, of course. Ranching was never easy, and they faced droughts, hard winters, and market downturns. Helena had 2 more children, a daughter they named Emma Rose, and another son they named Thomas Peter, after the reverend who had married them and the stagecoach driver who had helped save Helena's life. Isaiah expanded the ranch gradually, careful never to take on more than they could handle. He became known throughout the territory as an honest man and a skilled rancher. Helena became a respected member of the community, known for her sharp mind and generous heart. William Sutherland eventually married his widow and moved to another part of the territory. They heard news of him occasionally, but he was no longer part of their lives. Helena sometimes thought of him and hoped he had found happiness, but she never regretted her decision. On their 10th anniversary, Isaiah took Helena back to Globe for dinner at the hotel. Over dessert, he pulled out a small box. "I never gave you a proper engagement ring," he said. "I would like to remedy that now." Inside the box was a simple gold band set with a single sapphire. "Isaiah, you did not have to. I wanted to. That stone is the color of the Montana sky on a clear winter day, the day you came into my life." He took her hand. 10 years ago, a storm brought you to my door. It was the best day of my life." Helena slipped the ring on her finger. It fit perfectly, just like everything else about her life with Isaiah. "Mine too." They raised their children in that ranch house, teaching them to work hard, to be honest, and to value love above all else. Ethan grew to be tall and strong like his father, with the same quiet competence. Emma was fierce and independent, reminding Helena of herself. Thomas was gentle and bookish, happiest with his nose in a book. When the children were grown, Isaiah and Helena finally took that trip to California to visit his parents and sister. They spent a month there, enjoying the milder climate and the chance to see a different part of the country, but they were both eager to return home to Montana. "This was wonderful," Helena said as their train pulled out of the station, "but I missed the ranch." "Me too," Isaiah agreed. "There is no place like home." They returned to find everything running smoothly. Ethan, now 22, had managed things capably in their absence. He had his eye on a girl in town, and by year's end, there was another wedding at the Harper Ranch. The years rolled on. They added a second house on the property for Ethan and his bride. Emma married a doctor and moved to Globe, though she visited often. Thomas went east to college, then returned to help run the ranch with his father. Through it all, Helena and Isaiah's love remained constant. They still sat together by the fire in the evenings, still talked late into the night, still kissed like newlyweds. "You ever think about that first night?" Helena asked one evening. They were in their 60s now, their hair gray, their faces lined with age and laughter. "When Pete pounded on your door all the time," Isaiah said, "best sound I ever heard. I was so cold, so scared, and then you opened the door. And I saw the woman I would love for the rest of my life." He took her hand, his grip still strong. "I knew it even then, I think. Or maybe I am just romanticizing the memory. No, I think you did know. I think we both knew deep down, even if we did not admit it yet." They sat in comfortable silence, watching the fire. Outside, snow was falling again, blanketing the ranch in white. But inside, everything was warm. "The winters here can be brutal," Isaiah said eventually, "but they brought me you, so I will never complain about Montana winters again." Helena laughed. You will definitely still complain. You complained about the cold just yesterday. Did I? Well, I am old. I am allowed to complain occasionally. You are not that old, old enough. He pulled her close. Old enough to know how lucky I am, how blessed we have been. Yes, Helena agreed, resting her head on his shoulder. We have been very blessed. Years later, when Helena was 78 and Isaiah was 81, they celebrated their 55th wedding anniversary. Their children, grandchildren, and even great-grandchildren gathered at the ranch for a celebration. The house was full of laughter and love. 3 generations of Harpers who existed because a storm had brought a bride to the wrong ranch. At the end of the evening, after everyone had gone home or gone to bed, Helena and Isaiah sat together in their bedroom, the same bedroom they had shared for more than half a century. 55 years, Helena marveled. How did we get so old, one day at a time? Isaiah was moving slower now, his joints stiff with arthritis, but his mind was still sharp. And every single day I would have chosen you all over again. Even on the days I was impossible, especially those days, you kept things interesting. He took her hand. I love you, Helena Harper. I loved you the day I opened my door and saw you standing there. I loved you the day you called off that ridiculous wedding. I loved you the day you married me, and I will love you until I take my last breath. Tears streamed down Helena's face. I love you too, so much. You are the best thing that ever happened to me. They held each other in the darkness, 2 hearts that had beaten as one for 55 years. Isaiah passed away peacefully in his sleep 2 years later, at the age of 83. Helena held his hand and told him she loved him one last time. She knew he heard her, even if he could no longer speak. The grief was crushing, a physical weight on her chest. But Helena took comfort in knowing that she had been blessed with a love that many people never experienced. She had been seen, truly seen, by a good man who loved her for exactly who she was. They had built a life together, raised a family, and loved each other through joy and sorrow. Helena lived another 5 years, surrounded by her children and grandchildren and great-grandchildren. She told them stories of the old days, of the frontier and the Wild West, and she told them, over and over, about the winter storm that had changed her life. I was supposed to marry William Sutherland, she would say, but the storm brought me to the wrong ranch. And the right cowboy answered the door. On the evening of her death at the age of 85, Helena sat on the porch of the ranch house one last time, watching the sunset paint the Montana sky. Emma sat beside her, holding her hand. It is beautiful, Helena whispered. Yes, Mama. Your father and I sat here so many times, watching the sky, talking about our days. Helena smiled. He loved this place, this life, and so did I. We know, Mama, and we love you. Helena squeezed her daughter's hand. Tell the others that I loved them, that I was so proud of all of you. And tell them to choose love always. Not convenience, not security. Love. That is what matters. I will tell them. That night, Helena passed away in her sleep, in the bedroom she had shared with Isaiah for 57 years. Her family found her with a peaceful expression on her face, as though she was simply resting. At her funeral, the church and globe overflowed with people. She had touched so many lives over the years, had been a pillar of the community, a beloved mother and grandmother. But more than that, she had been a woman who chose love over comfort, who had the courage to follow her heart even when it was terrifying. Years later, Emma's granddaughter, researching family history, found a box of old letters in the attic. Among them was the marriage certificate for Isaiah Harper and Helena Andrews, dated less than a week after Helena's first planned wedding. Also in the box was a journal Helena had kept. The young woman stayed up late reading it, captivated by her great-great-grandmother's story. The stagecoach accident, the storm, Isaiah opening the door, the whirlwind romance, the decision to call off the wedding to William Sutherland. And throughout the journal, written again and again in Helena's neat handwriting, were variations of the same theme. I thought I knew what I wanted when I came to Montana. But life had other plans. The storm brought me to the wrong ranch. But Isaiah was the right cowboy, the only cowboy. My cowboy, and I will be grateful for that storm every day of my life. The young woman closed the journal and looked out the window at the ranch that still stood, 5 generations later. The house had been expanded and modernized, but the bones of it were the same. The land Isaiah and Helena had worked was still in the family, passed down through the years. She thought about her great-great-grandmother's courage, about how a single moment, a single choice could change everything, about how love, real love, was worth any risk. And she smiled, knowing that the story of the winter storm that brought a bride to the wrong ranch would be told in their family for generations to come. Because it was not just a story about a storm or a wrong turn or an accident. It was a story about choosing love. And that kind of story never got old. The Montana winters were still brutal, sweeping across the plains with snow and wind that could bury a house in a single night. But the Harper family had learned from Isaiah and Helena that even the harshest storms could bring unexpected blessings. Sometimes, the wrong turn led you exactly where you were meant to be. Sometimes, the storm brought you home. And sometimes, when you least expected it, the right person answered the door.